Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 90 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. Whew, this is another fun one. We got another great group lined up this week. I'm excited to talk about the end of free agency with, I guess maybe the best way to put it is like the Club FFL gang, but there's a couple of other things you guys are doing. So I'll introduce my guests. We've got Josh Hudson at the one Husto. Well, I'll let you do it because I'm terrible at saying that. So I got Josh.
First
Hudson.
off, intro Kelly. She's a hell of a lot more important than I am. She's so.
I was going to end with the good bang there. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead. Tell us what you got.
Well, I'm Josh Hudson. People say that I run Club Fantasy FFL. I'm just a contributor like everybody else. But most people would probably know Club Fantasy from our work with Women of Fantasy Football, which Kelly is also a contributor of. But yeah, I mean, we have our own YouTube page, youtube.com/Club Fantasy FFL. We do weekly podcasts, articles on our website, clubfantasyffl.com, Twitter at Club Fantasy FFL. I mean, that's what we do. It's all about having fun and shooting the shit and that kind of thing. So
I love it. And then, of course, as you mentioned, we've got the one and only Kelly Singh. Welcome, Kelly, to the podcast.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. As soon as you asked, I was like, heck yeah, let's do this.
Well, and so what we had other guests lined up that kind of fell through at the last minute, and there was some scrambling. And my first thought was like, well, who could I ask that would like probably say yes without much like hesitation? And I was like, you know what? Kelly and I have been talking a lot on Twitter. I bet she'd be game for this. So appreciate you coming on, Kelly. And then of course, kind of dragging Josh over from Club FFL with you too. So that would be
whatever Kelly's involved with, count me in. That's all I know.
Right, and we just heard before the podcast.
Golf, so.
Well, before the podcast, you're mentioning that you got a new gig. You're working now with Trophy Smack. Congratulations on that. Do you want to tell the listeners or anybody what's the latest with that? What's the latest in Kelly world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been doing all of this amazing content creation with Club FFL, with Women of Fantasy Football, with the commish, which I've been with for a couple years now, and IBT Media. That's all been freelance work. Oh shoot! And Woodward Bets broadcasting once a week.
So busy.
I was like, God, the signs are right there behind you.
Right behind me. Make some bets at Woodward Bets, part of the Woodward Sports Network. But just recently, starting tomorrow, I am part of the marketing team at Trophy Smack, which makes trophies for corporate awards as well as a lot of fantasy awards across all the sports and content as well. But I'm going to be part of that marketing team, which is what I do. So I'm super excited. Thank you for asking.
That's amazing, Kelly. So happy to hear it. Couldn't happen to a better person, honestly. I love seeing your updates. I love hearing about what you're doing and reading all your work. You got some really good insights. And I do want to talk a second about that Women of Fantasy Football. I think that is a great idea. I think that is something that needs more boosting. That we need to talk more about this. There's a whole untapped market, not only of customers, so to speak, but of content creators, right? There's a lot of people out there with terrific ideas. And I feel like the more chances we have to give them voices, I'm all for it. So what do you have to say about that? I guess, do you have any input or anything that we should look out for as that kind of comes into the next season?
Yeah, for sure. I will let Josh talk about our new partnership that we have going, but something that I've been really excited about, and I think Faith, who is our cohort in Women of Fantasy Football, has been really excited to have me on the team because she and I have been talking privately. We're able to bounce ideas off of each other that we may not be able to bounce off of one of the guys, for instance, or she gets my input on a lot of marketing things where we've now landed on something really cool that's coming this summer. I almost said it out loud, but we haven't shared it.
I'll do it.
We are live, Kelly. We are live. Let's be careful. We have a podcast that people will be listening to later, but if you're joining us live on YouTube, you might have heard Kelly slip almost, but no, she caught it. She caught it. Good job.
But Faith and I are doing some traveling this summer on behalf of Women of Fantasy Football, and we're really excited. And then Josh can talk about our new partnership, which does highlight women in the sports community in a really positive light.
Yeah, was that the galvanize? Is that what that is, Josh?
Correct. Yeah. So we were extremely lucky enough to have Laura Oakman on our Women of Fantasy show last August. For those that don't know, Laura is one of the longest tenured sideline reporters in the NFL. She works with Fox Sports, and she runs an organization called Galvanize. And what Galvanize does is they want to help encourage, mentor, and promote the idea that women belong in sports. And one of the biggest ways that they do that is through organizing these boot camps with professional sports teams. Obviously, Laura's very well ingrained in the NFL and does a lot with different NFL franchises. They're actually getting ready to announce their slate of boot camps for this summer. I know through my conversations with Laura and Faith, Laura is working to, I believe she wants to do 5 this year. She wants to scale it down just a little versus from last year and a couple of years ago. Dates are still to be announced, but they're coming soon. But it's a way for women to kind of experience not just the on-camera side of working in sports, but also behind the scenes, which Kelly's now getting a taste of working in the marketing side. There's a lot more to sports than just being on camera and talking, at the audience and talking to coaches and players. It's, running social media and, community outreach and all of these different things. And that's what these boot camps are set up for. So when we do our raffles in August during the Women of Fantasy Football event, essentially what that's going to do is it's going to contribute to a scholarship fund that basically pays for up to, X amount of women to attend these boot camps because, they're not cheap, unfortunately.
No, that's awesome. And I think I've been following Galvanize for a little while. I love what they do because, and exactly like what you said, not everything has to be about, on camera stuff. There's a ton of behind the scenes work that I feel like gets kind of, I don't want to say ignored per se, but gets kind of brushed aside. There's a ton of people that make all of that work. And there's a ton of jobs in those fields that I think a lot of people, and women especially, don't look at that as an option or don't think of that maybe as an option, when in reality, you can create content and do a whole bunch of different things and never have your face shown on camera if you want. There's a whole bunch of ways to get your opinions out there and to make your voice heard, literally and figuratively, that don't require you being on camera. And I think sometimes, and especially, I'm oversimplifying, but I think in general, I think there's a lot of, visibility and like, having a certain, camera appeal in all of this for women. And I think there's some disconnect where it's like men don't have to worry about that nearly as much. You know what I mean? Like,
I was going to say, I'm definitely not the prettiest face on camera.
Look at we're faces made for radio, Josh, and that's not a problem.
Hey, I've been doing radio 20 years, baby.
Exactly. But I mean, I feel like there's this weird like disconnect where I feel, maybe I'm incorrect here, but I feel like there's this weird, I have to be pretty to get on camera, and that's the only way I can make it. And that's not true. You have to be smart, you have to be intelligent, you have to be funny, and all of those things. I mean, obviously that's the part that I like the most about this movement is that there is no one way to do this. You don't have to be any one thing, just be you. I think that's ultimately what drew me to you, Kelly, is that you're always you. You're just yourself. That's just who you are, and it's never different. That's you. And it's showing it pays off, right? It shows it pays off. So I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you're right. There is this kind of double standard. I feel like that's why I wasn't in sports in my 20s, because there wasn't necessarily this opportunity. And by the time they did start hiring women for these roles, they were on camera roles, and you did have to fit a certain mold. And by that time, I didn't fit that mold anymore. But that's exactly being myself, doing what I do along with my marketing skills, allowed me to get the gigs I have now, not just the writing gigs, but the on-camera gig with Woodward, for instance. They're like, we can get TNA anywhere. We want somebody who knows what they're talking about, who enjoys the sport, who is media trained, which I am. And then, I mean, like, I think I'm still cute. So, I mean, I'm still cute,
for sure.
but I'm not like...
Kelly.
You know what
gorgeous.
I mean? No, but you know what I'm getting at. You know what I'm getting at. I'm 43 years old. I'm not 23 years old anymore. So I think that demographic is changing. That view of what we see a woman in sports being is changing. And I'm just really excited to be even outside of content now and developing campaigns and using my brain to do what I do best. So I'm excited to be in sports like full time now.
And I really hope that rubs off on a lot of other women. There's a lot of young women, old women, however old you are. There is a space for you in this industry. There is nothing but positive upside. And I think that we're seeing a big change in the last couple years. It's really, really taken off. And it's been awesome to see.
Sure.
So I'd love too what you guys are doing with Women of Fantasy Football. So who else is involved in that league, I guess, or in that movement, maybe, if that's a thing, Josh, if you want to start with that. Like, who else do you guys got coming into that this year? Do you know?
Honestly, it's everybody that writes and contributes with Club Fantasy. It's we don't really put a pin saying that, you know what, you work with Women of Fantasy and then you work with Club Fantasy. It's not anything about that. I mean,
yep.
What we're doing with Women of Fantasy, we're focusing more so just on pushing the idea of, inclusivity and getting more women involved. It's not necessarily about, hey, I'm going to bring this woman on to work with us and all of her content's going to be on Women of Fantasy Football. It's not so much about that. What we're really looking to do is, just spread the word. Really.
Go ahead. You provide like a supportive community, a safe space. You provide an opportunity where there may not have been an opportunity. You're showcasing women's content. Like you said, it's not just on the Women of Fantasy site. It's also on Club Fantasy. It's a lot of cross promotion and teamwork. I can go into our group chat and tell them like the most horrible man story, and all of them are like, who do we beat up? They're there for it. Or our wins. They're there for our wins, and they share, and they're so supportive. So that's basically what it is that Josh hit the nail on the head with that inclusivity bit. It's an inclusive space, and I hope more of that.
Yeah, and I think too, what you're saying, Josh, is it makes it sound like it's an entry point. It's a spot. It's a place that people can go if they don't know where to start. And maybe there's plenty of women out there that don't know who do I go to first? Who will be willing to publish my content? You're kind of
and that's why we do the Women of Fantasy shows. I mean, we like to be able to bring on these women that have been in the industry for a long time and let them tell their stories and serve as an inspiration, because at the end, and that's one thing that Laura preaches, especially with her galvanize boot camps. She's like, you don't have to be a certain age to do that. I mean, during last year's boot camp, she had women as young as 18 years old and as old as 48 years old going to these boot camps. Wow, and awesome. Some of them have never done anything in sports. Some of them are still getting their foot in the door. Some of them are deciding to change careers. And, you never know when inspiration hits, and people change careers all the time. Why can't that be a woman getting into sports? Yeah. So I'm here to help, and all of us at Club Fantasy, that's really what we want to do is, just be that entry point for people. And this partnership with Galvanize, I think, can really open a lot of doors for women and even men that, actually are supportive of women, that aren't looking at women like, you don't belong here. You've never played this game. You can't talk about it. Like, that's an attitude that you can leave at the front door and go kick rocks, as far as I'm concerned. So,
like the classic, you don't know who pitches for the Mets. You can't cover sports. Like, quit with the.
No, I had a coworker the other day when the NFL announced the changes to the Rooney Rule. He told me, he's like, there's no substitution for experience. I said, yeah. How well is Michael Jordan running the Chicago or the Charlotte Hornets right now?
Crickets.
One of the greatest basketball players in NBA history, if not the greatest. And ain't done jack shit as owner of the Hornets. So I don't tell me that. You don't have to have experience playing a game to be able to intelligently talk about it. And I shut him up real quick. I was like, I don't care.
Other angle you could take on that is, let's get more women in the experience of managing sports. Let's get more women in content creation.
That's what the Rooney Rule is set up to do.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's literally because you need some experience in order to get more experience. And if you don't give them a starting point, if you don't have an entry point, the whole thing is moot. So yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I love what Laura and the whole team at Galvanize is doing too. I think that's a terrific idea. So I definitely look forward to hearing more from you guys over the summer here, of course. And as we get into that launch
and just a nice little preview, we have some really bomb-ass raffle items this year. Just letting you know.
I'm excited. Well, we'll definitely have to keep us posted. We'll be in touch,
Absolutely.
Of course, as we go through the off season. But let's get into the content, right? Let's start creating some content here. So I wanted to talk at least a little bit about some of the news. I feel like this week was luckily very quiet in general when it comes to fantasy news. we had a really crazy March, and it's nice that it kind of went out like a lamb, right? Where it's like, whew, we had the combine and all these trades and then free agency, and it's just been just crazy. And I like that we kind of had a week where I felt like we could all kind of catch our breath. So the one news item, so to speak, that I wanted to talk about and kind of, I guess, get your opinions on was just the Bruce Arians move was the most intriguing to me. There's been a lot of, I don't know, opinions or a lot of, speculation about what that means for Tom Brady. Or, I mean, does that mean Tom Brady's getting traded to Miami, which I don't think is true. But I mean, I guess in general, do you think, what does this mean for any of those players? And Kelly, we'll start with you. Do you see this as a big thing for in Dynasty or just in fantasy in general? Do you see this moving the needle for anybody?
I don't think it's going to affect Dynasty in general, or perhaps even the people who are saying, oh, this was a Tom Brady decision. He was going to retire if they didn't get rid of Arians, whatever. I think personally, Arians has had some health issues. He is not in the greatest health. Being a head coach has to tax you. It can't be an easy job. It has to be super stressful. So why wouldn't he take this opportunity to leave head coaching, still be part of the organization? Just like we were talking about, there are so many parts to an organization, and he's still going to be part of that organization, just in a different capacity. And I think it was a personal choice.
Well, I think that's a good point. And I mean, Bruce Arians is not a spring chicken, right? He's getting up there, and he's done a lot. Coaching is not easy. We've seen it affect a lot of coaches of all different ages, and it's stressful and all that. So I think you're on the right track there. I guess, Josh, do you kind of have that same feeling? Like it's really not that big of a deal for fantasy in general?
Yeah, as long as Tom Brady is there, I'm not really that worried about it. I mean, let's be real here. How many irrelevant fantasy options does Tom Brady produce? Like, he's going to keep elevating people, right? Peyton Manning did the exact same thing. He essentially was his own offensive coordinator at this point in his career. I think you can say the same about Tom Brady. So I'm not really so much worried about the offense falling off, especially because Byron Leftwich, you can say what you want about his career as a player. I feel like he's done pretty well as an OC, and he's had a really good mentor in Bruce Arians. So now he's going to get the opportunity to show that, hey, I don't need Arians in my ear to call a good game. So now it's going to become, well, did he need Tom Brady to call a good game? Like, there's always going to be these whispers with Leftwich, right? But you still have Godwin, you still have Evans, you still have Fournette. Gronk technically hasn't come back yet, but we all know that now that Brady's back, it's only a matter of time. I'm not very worried about this offense at all. In terms of Dynasty, the only worry I would have at this point is age. That's it.
Yep.
And I can't speak on the defensive side of the ball because I don't really play IDP leagues. So sorry, guys.
I don't either. I'm unabashedly not anti-IDP, just agnostic to I don't know. Yeah. I already have enough stress on my plate dealing with the offense. I'm still learning. But I do want to say there's one piece of this that I think has been talked about. It's not that it hasn't been talked about, but I want to hit on a little harder. And it's the fact that Arians chose this because he didn't want to have anything chaotic happen this season that then kind of forced him out and to cause a lot of chaos for the coaching staff. I think that, to me, that does have an impact on Dynasty. He was like, let's say Tom Brady gets hurt or, something happens, we go 10-7 and I leave at the end of the year. I don't control the narrative. I think he was big about saying that. And I think this is a way to keep that offense consistent and kind of getting out before it has to happen, right? And we've seen a couple different players and coaches in general kind of do this. I really like the timing in a sense too. It's like it's before the draft, so he doesn't draft his guys and then bring someone else in. He's keeping on Bowles as the head coach, so to speak. He's taking on a role in the front office. Like it makes it like the smoothest transition I think you can ask for, which for me impacts Dynasty because that means most of these players and situations are most likely not going to change, right? If this had gone a different direction, you have guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin this year. Well, Godwin may not be there next year. He was barely there this year. Mike Evans, he's getting older. Maybe he goes somewhere else. Fournette is on the last legs of maybe his contract, or he's still balling out. I think in theory, what this makes me feel is a little more safe and secure with my Buccaneers assets, right? I mean, it's a little movement, but it's something. If they go struggling out of the gate with Todd Bowles, I still don't think that they're going to throw that away and start over, right? This is the start of a new regime with Todd Bowles being there. So, and again, it just makes it like the easiest way to transition, which in Dynasty, transitions can be good or bad. right? And that's something we're going to talk about as we get kind of into the free agency side of things, of course, is, when changes occur, is that something that we like? There are some players, and we'll kind of wander down this path at various points, but there are some players that I feel like really benefited. Hi, Kyle, by the way. There are some players that really benefited from a free agency change, from changing teams or changing coaches or getting a new quarterback, right? Those kind of free agency changes happen all the time. And it's nice, I guess, for the Bucs at least to not have a change. And maybe that's the best thing that could happen to them. So that's kind of where I wanted to bring it around to a dynasty mindset. I feel like there's so much chaos. Sometimes the non-chaos gets lost in the shuffle. Does that make sense, Josh? Am I ringing true?
No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think you take solace in the fact that Godwin signed a 3-year deal. Fournette signed a 3-year deal. So these guys are, again, they're going to be there. So with this smooth transition, I think the only thing that you really have to worry about potentially is without Arians there, egos blowing up and getting the best of them because they don't have a strong figurehead to control. And we saw how quickly things got out of hand with the Jets in New York with Todd Bowles. Maybe things change now. But again, I still think that's a worry at this point because it hasn't been proven or disproven, excuse me. The second, what happens if Leftwich gets a head coaching job next year? Now you're in that transition period, right?
Yep.
So, but again, these are hurdles that you're always going to encounter in Dynasty. So for me, you're still playing a 1 year at a time game, even though you are still trying to look 2 to 3 years down the road. The best thing to me that comes from this, Fournette signed a 3-year deal, Godwin with the 3-year deal, Evans still under contract, continually restructuring. To me, this is an opportunity that you can maybe offload them to a contender, for instance. Maybe you're kind of in that middle of the pack. Like, hey, get some of these, higher end draft picks over the next couple draft classes and hit that reload button.
Yeah, I like that. Kelly, are you kind of on that same page?
Yeah, I'm kind of soaking this all in because when I say that I don't think it's going to have an impact, I'm strictly thinking about the players themselves. And not necessarily how they're functioning together as a team or with their coaches. And that's probably just because I'm newer to Dynasty, but that's kind of my mindset is how talented is my guy? And is he still going to have a job? Yes. I don't think anybody on the Bucs, like we've already discussed, they're not moving for the next 3 years. So when you bring up that consistency and that being the impact on Dynasty, I'm like, oh yeah, that's such a great way to frame it. I hadn't thought of it that way. So thanks for that. This is really expanding my own education as well.
Well, that's what these conversations are all about, right? Whether you're in them or listening, it's all about making us better, right? We're all, and
Yep.
A lot of the people that listen, and we've had some people coming in the chat already. A lot of people that listen to us are pretty hardcore Dynasty people, but there's always a new opinion. There's always an outside of the box. No matter what your box is, no matter how big it gets, it's always good to think outside of it.
Well, and the other side of it too, there's no one right way to play Dynasty.
Bingo. Yep.
So, you can always do what you feel is going to work best for you. You want a championship one way, great. Maybe in another league, you win a championship a completely different way. And, I've seen it happen in numerous times. People go through these productive struggles. People just buy up every veteran, never have any draft picks, and win. There's no wrong way to play Dynasty unless you're just consistently losing. That's about it.
But even then, if you're having fun, is it really wrong?
Yeah,
as long as you're having fun,
there's
it
that.
really matters. Yeah.
Hey, some people do like donating league fees. I mean, I guess that's fun. So,
well, I guess at some point maybe it becomes less fun. But if it's still fun, you're in the league. If it's not fun, get out. That's pretty much my number one rule. When do I know if I need to leave a league? Well, are you having fun in that league? Then stay in that league. It's really that simple. Or obviously, if it's like a $5,000 buy-in and you just lost your job, maybe that's the one you quit, right? There are some other factors, but in general, if it's for fun,
but it's for fun, Andrew. I will find the $5,000.
I got a liver, right? We could sell. Oh, I have to keep that. No, I think I kind of bringing it back for just a second, talking about the chaos and the craziness. I keep thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if Antonio Brown comes back, right? He and Bruce Arians, the ABBA combo didn't work. Right. It was obviously there was some butting of heads there. The fact that the regime isn't changing and he's staying with the team, I think means no, AB is not coming back. They don't want him back. He doesn't want to go back. So that's kind of where it would be interesting. It'd be a hell of a story if like in August, we get some weird blurb that's like, AB's back in the practice facility. He got his ankle fixed and he's going to play in the second period. I'm just saying, wouldn't that be crazy? I'm not saying it's going to happen.
No, he put Tampa on blast. There's no way that Tampa is going to be like, you know what, all's forgiven. No,
I agree. I just keep thinking it'd be interesting, but not from a sense of I'm predicting it to happen. Are you with me, Kelly? Wouldn't that be interesting?
It would be interesting for sure. Definitely make news and a lot of things to talk about. I just think Tom Brady probably feels super slighted already by just AB leaving, and he was vouching for him. So I can't even see that scenario happening. But even more so, something I had been talking about on another platform earlier was the idea that AB's making like this ultimatum, like, I'll fix my ankle if you sign me. And it's like, you might want to work on your, ultimatum game, because you might, you fix your ankle and then go get a job. That's like me going out there and saying, well, I'll learn how to write if you hire me to be a writer. Like, I don't understand.
There's no downside to them saying no. Like, oh, your ankle's not fixed and I won't hire you. I'll go hire someone else. You know what I mean? Like, what are you taking off the table here? You know what I mean? It's a lose-lose for you. I don't get it. Yeah, I don't get that at all.
It's so weird.
Yeah. I heard that today and I was just like, what a smart guy. Like, man, there was a whole bunch of people posting the meme, like, that's a bold move, Cotton. You know what I mean? Like, just let's see if that works. I can't imagine a team taking on that drama after the way it ended. But then if you add on the fact that he is injured, and that was the whole reason that drama occurred, and he's not willing to fix it until you sign him. Yeah, it's like, well, then never mind. That is obviously, I would go get that ankle fixed even if I'm not playing football. Like, why? Just go get it fixed, man. It's got to be annoying to walk on. Like, you're only hurting yourself. I don't get it. All right, so I think that's enough Buccaneers talk. Although that is some interesting stuff going on there. I know that there are a bunch of other news stories. I guess, was there anything else from this week that you guys had on your radar that you wanted to bring up before we kind of get into some more of the free agency stuff? Anything at all, Josh? Let's see, you got anything first?
No, nothing that really came across from me. We haven't really had a ton of signings outside of like Bobby Wagner going to the Rams, which. Where the hell are they mining this money? Like, is it through Bitcoin or something? Because, like, good God, like, it's just like, here you go, dollar bills, y'all. Like, come and get it. And I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Well, it just goes to prove and goes to show that the cap is crap, right? Like, the cap doesn't exist. I mean, you can make it do whatever you want to do if you want to do it right. I guess, Kelly, you got anything like that? Any comment on that or any other news stories you want to discuss tonight?
Yeah, I did want to share something that popped up across my social media right before I sat down here. And it's totally a rumor, but being here in Phoenix, it's a big rumor. We still have not worked out a contract deal with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. I really don't think he'll be going anywhere, but there's still been some really strong rumors, especially because the Cardinals apparently met with Malik Willis. So, there's been talk in this article that I came across that the Panthers have been really interested in getting Murray. So, I mean, we can't really close the door on anything Kyler Murray wise until that contract is signed. But being a native, I feel like he's going to stay. But I do find it interesting that they're meeting with other prospects. As young as Kyler is.
You love to see it.
Well, that would be interesting. And I think sometimes there's this calm before the storm that we're probably experiencing right now in a way, but there's still a lot of time to make moves, right? The draft isn't until the end of April 28th. We're looking at 4 weeks from tonight. And again, the DAP Network will be having a live draft reaction show that night. All of us that are on all the podcasts are going to get together. So we got the Trade Addicts, the Dynasty Junkies, Get Real, all those different podcasts, the Timeline guys, of course. So those guys, we're all going to kind of hop on together at various points of that night and do a live show. So if you're listening to this, tune in that night, starting at, I think, about 8 o'clock Eastern. I think is when the draft starts. We're going to have that. But what I'm getting at with this is there are some times before the draft to make a trade, but there's also time during the draft. I know last year we saw a few of those trades that were maybe not huge names, but like kind of make some moves happen during the draft. I wouldn't be shocked if we see some of that this year too. I think a lot of dynasty players and football fans in general have kind of heard how down this class is. But as always, as we get closer to the draft, that ends up being a little less true as you start to see what you have. I think this one's just not as top heavy. It's not as flashy. There's not that, one star to kind of point to and say, this is the best guy. We don't have anybody like a Burrow or a Tua even in that same class, or Trevor Lawrence, like any of those big name attractions. But I think what that really does is just opens it up to so many different ways for teams to take this. So I think that's a new part I hadn't heard, is that Kyler might get traded or, find another contract somewhere else. That would be really interesting during the draft, wouldn't it? Like if something happens and Malik Willis goes to the Lions, and then all the plans start to change, right? There's some other cascades that could happen, or Lions trade the second pick to Arizona, who then in that trade trades Murray to, we don't know. And I love that part of this time of year of the NFL, where it's just like,
I want one of these like ESPN NBA trade machine moves where like 5 different teams are getting involved in trades just to make salary cap numbers. I want to see that one time in the NFL just so I can say I witnessed.
I would love to see like
Jerry
a 3-way.
Maguire.
Yeah.
Right? Or draft day.
Draft day. I was just going to say, by the way, co-host of the Dynasty Junkies, Rocky Petrella, has not seen draft day. And I think that needs to be rectified.
Get him off the show. Fire him.
You know what? I'm not going to say fired. He brought me on the show. I am not in that position. But Rocky, you are editing this. Make sure after you're done.
All right, we're helping Andrew throw a coup.
That's right. Let's go get it done. It's worth your time, Rock. I'm just saying. I'm going to keep bugging you until you watch it, hopefully before the draft day itself.
I will say I will be at the draft. So I'm very excited for that.
That'll be fun.
And yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm excited.
I think this year, if this is how free agency has gone, imagine how the draft is going to go.
Right.
Like part of me is like, this is just the warm up, and that's going to be awesome. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, my Eagles have 3 first-round picks, so I'm strapped in. I'm ready to go because Howie likes to trade.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see what moves he pulls off.
And you're, I'm sure, very aware that some of the picks they've made haven't been terrific. So they really, maybe it's time to.
Yeah, because I need reminders how much our wide receiver core sucks. Thanks, Andrew.
I just wanted to remind the listeners that the Eagles are not great at making first-round picks except for Devonta Smith. Anyway, we're going to move on to kind of where this is landing. Is that free agency is, like I said, is kind of coming to an end, and we're going to try to wrap it up a little bit. Obviously, as we head into March, we're still going to be looking more at the rookies and trying to figure out the draft and see what guys we want to take with our rookie drafts in Dynasty and things like that. But I think there is some weight to kind of say, well, how much do we really value these changes? I mean, we hit on it a little bit before with the Buccaneers thing, but just in a broader sense, I mean, Kelly, you're kind of newer to Dynasty. You mentioned it before, like you don't really think about some of that, but what do you think about when you're looking at the offseason for Dynasty leagues? Is there something that, you kind of focus on, or that you kind of sit on and say, that's what I'm familiar with, so that's what I lean on? Or is it you just listen to smart people like the rest of us and try to glean knowledge from the general hive mind? What do you tend to do?
Well, I have found that listening to smart people often pulls me in different directions because there are so many different ways to play Dynasty. So I've decided that I'm just making my own little hybrid way and doing my own thing. I listen to my gut a lot, whether it's my life, personal life, my career, or fantasy football. I listen to my gut. People tend to say I fall up. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to listen to my gut. And when it comes to the free agency, I feel like I need to be cautious. So what I've done is just pay attention to the player. What did they do last year? Do I feel like they're going to land comfortably somewhere else? Yes, then I may pick them up. No, I'm going to stay away from them. And even if I'm not sure, I've been staying away from those players as well. And that's just me as a new player trying to be cautious because I don't want to end up with a lame duck on my bench that I could have used elsewhere. So that's kind of my mindset as it comes to free agency. If someone's super young, I get the feeling that they're going to get another chance somewhere else. So And that may be the mom in me too. Like
the optimist.
Look, you can do it. You're young. You didn't get a fair shake. This team is aging. They need more life. You're going to get another shot. But somebody that's like, I will even say 26, 27, 28, especially 20, somebody in the late end of their 20s that's just not producing. They're a free agent now. They were already a backup to the backup. I'm like, oh my gosh, this
Red
is
flag.
probably not a good thing. But then you have the free agents that are like a veteran who I'm going to use a terrible example. This is a really bad example, but like say you have like a Sammy Watkins, for instance, that just doesn't produce, but there's a team that's desperate for a Sammy Watkins and they pick him up. I'm still staying away from him because he's Sammy Watkins. So I don't know if that explains like where I stand, but that's how I've been treading water.
That's perfect. And I feel like a lot of times that's kind of the way I started in Dynasty too. This is my 5th Dynasty season. And I'm in, ridiculous amount of leagues, not like the others that I co-host with, but for me, it feels ridiculous. Anything over 10 just gets to be kind of ridiculous. But at some point you kind of, I myself, when I first started, you kind of just go, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to hold. Right. And then you get trade offers and you're like, that sounds good, but I don't know. And then it's March. I don't need to worry about it. I'm just going to say decline. I think, and we talk about this almost to a fault at some points, trading and timing and all of that, it all combines together. Context is key. And time is one of the pieces of context that I think sometimes gets misunderstood or misrepresented. Is it like, do I need to make that trade today? No, I don't. I don't need to make that. So I'll come back to it if I feel like it comes around, right? And there are definitely times where that's burned me, where a price has changed and I'm on the wrong side. But I feel like more often than not, the trades that I don't make end up helping my team quite a bit. Josh, are you kind of on that same page, or do you have a different philosophy, I guess, when it comes to the offseason?
When it comes to free agency, not speaking trades, but like free agency, anytime wide receivers change teams, I instantly put them on the trade block and wipe my hands with them. Free agent wide receivers that change teams typically have an absolutely terrible first season. Even the younger ones, like, you saw Corey Davis, who I think was 25 when he signed with the Jets last year. But again, it's the Jets. I get it. And then you see like Christian Kirk, who I believe is 25 as well, just left Arizona, now going to Jacksonville. And he was paid a buttload of money, and he's ideally going to be their number one guy. Maybe he grows with Trevor Lawrence, but I would almost much rather see if I could pull a couple seconds, a second and a third, like some draft picks in the next couple of draft classes and be like, you know what? I'll take my dart throws elsewhere. That's your headache now. Even with guys that are in their later 20s, like a Tyreek, Devontae Adams, who were just recently traded, these guys are at the top of their game. They're now essentially starting over. Like, we know they're good, but now they have to get a better feel for a different quarterback. Now, I understand Adams played with Carr. That's been almost 10 years. Some things aren't actually like riding a bike. So I'm very curious to see how that happens. But again, if I could go through and I could pull, a top 20 wide receiver who has wide receiver 1 upside and maybe another first round pick, I'll part with Hill or Adams at that point. You know what I mean?
Well, and you're hitting on
running
the nail
backs.
Here.
Running backs. I'm more interested in buying that change teams in free agency, just because I think naturally they're cheaper, simply because teams don't want to give running backs that second contract. So they're less expensive to buy from a dynasty perspective. Look at James Conner last year, switching teams, ends up, an RB1, and now he's got a new 3-year contract. Now is when I would be looking to sell James Conner.
Exactly.
But, at that point, it's like, all right, let me hop in. I'll go ahead and I'll look to buy these players now. Like we saw Rashad Penny, kind of light it up. He ended up re-signing. Ronald Jones now switching teams. That's somebody actually I would be more interested in selling. Like if I could get a second round pick, I'm okay with that at that point. But that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to free agency.
Let me disagree here for a second, a little bit.
Oh,
and I don't know how worthwhile this opinion is, but I'm going to share it anyway, because I feel like when you mention names like Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill, that is a different animal. Like that person has talent. It's not talent that has to be grown into. It's just talent. And I would say they're on the veteran end. They know what they're doing, and those teams pick them up so they can plop them right down in the field, and it doesn't matter who's throwing to them. That's just my opinion, and I think that differs wildly from any other caliber of player. That's the
disagree
only
with that.
thing I picked up on is there's a difference between a player that has that proven talent, whereas Christian Kirk, we know he's good. Like, he's a good player and they paid a crap ton of money for him. And I'm actually gambling on him, but he's not on the level of a Tyreek Hill or a Devontae Adams. And I think they're definitely gambling. It's a total crapshoot with him.
Well, and I think to wrap it up in maybe a different way, and what you're saying is there are studs, and then the studs you don't need to worry about as much. But then there are those guys with potential and that have upside and things like that. And maybe what you're saying, Josh, is those people, when they change teams, you're just like, I'd rather be out than risk it. And I don't think either of
it's
those
one
is
of
a
those,
bad plan.
get out a year early versus hanging on to an asset and then not getting anything 2 years later or a year later. You know what I mean?
There's something else that you said that I think is perfect here. It goes back to timing. When that trade happens, when they're signed, put them on the trade block, because there's a bump that they get when that happens, right? Mm-hmm. When Tyreek Hill gets traded, it's unlikely that ruins his value in Dynasty. Now, there were some people out there that were saying, "Oh, he's going to a Tagovailoa can't throw," and which we know isn't true. And then he's got Jalen Waddle to contend with. Well, he contended with Kelsey. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's going to get his. I think Waddle's going to get his too, right? So there's a whole bunch of this speculation that occurs when these moves happen. And I think if you can strike while the iron's hot and kind of make that news, work for you and get a little bit of a premium on it, now is exactly the time to do that, right? And if your general philosophy is when they change teams, they struggle, what you're doing here in theory anyway is you're selling. They're going to drop in value, or what you're speculating they're going to do is they're going to drop in value while they struggle, and then you buy them at that discount before they gain back up. And then in that delta that you've got from that player, you've gained value for your team, right? That's kind of the general thought, and I think that's a fine way to play. I mean, again, there is no wrong way to do this. I like that logic, and I think what you're trying to explain is correct me if I'm wrong here, with the bigger guys, with the studs, the more important guys, that delta can be higher. Right? Where you're going with like a Christian Kirk, that delta that you may be adding to your team may not be worth as much. But when Tyreek Hill gets traded, putting him on the trade block, selling him for a haul to someone who's a believer, you know what I mean? And then riding that as it kind of falls a little bit, or just comes back to reality even before the season. And then during the season, if he does struggle, now you can send a trade offer for that guy back and maybe send the exact same things except for a first round in 2023, right? Maybe that's the delta and you got a free 23 first. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of stuff that can really make the margins your where you're going to live. You know what I mean? So yeah,
that's the thing with Dynasty.
Everyone come sell to me is what we're saying, because I'm like, yes, come to me, little children, come to me.
Nothing wrong with that. I do think though there is something to be said too. What you said this too. Receivers changing teams is very different from running backs changing teams, right? A running back changing, and this is kind of Dynasty Philosophy 101, something I've learned and others have mentioned. This is not a unique idea, but receivers are almost always going to get, if they've got talent, you're going to see it. And talent then begets opportunity. Talent will then lead to opportunity. With running backs, it's kind of the opposite. Now, and I'm not saying they're not talented or anything, but if you get an opportunity, then your talent will shine through. And the opportunity is almost more important. And you've got running backs like A.J. Dillon, for instance, talented out the wazoo, but he's playing behind Aaron Jones. What does that do for us?
Don't worry, he's going to get plenty of opportunity this year because they don't have a wide receiver one or wide receiver.
I completely agree. I'm just using him as an example of like someone who is an opportunity away from making this difference, right? And then if that opportunity, if he, like even Rojo to an extent, right? Ronald Jones was playing behind, Lombardi Lenny, couldn't get on the field at all, right? Maybe he is talented and just didn't have the opportunity.
Still can't pass block, so it's not going to matter.
True, but now he's going to a team maybe that needs that and he has a better opportunity in Kansas City, right? So like, some of that stuff is where the changing could be better in theory for the running backs and can be more harmful for receivers. So I kind of like the way you put that. And that's something I haven't really qualified or quantified even in my head, but that's generally in line with my philosophy. So I don't mind that at all. I think that logic makes sense. Anything else on that?
Josh.
Then, I guess? Yeah, good job. That was bravo.
I'll take the wins when I get them.
Not a bad plan. All right. So I know there was one other thing I was going to mention, and it was more related to coaching change. You're kind of mentioning it there too. When you change teams, of course, you change quarterbacks, but you also change coaches. And in some of these cases, the coach changes also. And I think we say this sometimes in the fantasy world, but listen to what the teams are telling us with their pocketbook, not with the media, right? When you sign a big player, kind of like what Kelly said, when you sign a Devontae Adams, it's to drop him into that offense. You're going to use it. you're not going to sit him on the bench. You're not going to hold him out. You're not going to play him, 50% of snaps. You're going to load him up. And the same for Tyreek, right? So there's something to be said there too, and saying, well, they paid top dollar for this guy. Is that the same with Christian Kirk? Maybe that's the logic, that they saw something in Kirk and they're willing to pay him an ungodly amount of money for what we think is that talent. But I don't know, maybe the team just wants to ride him, I guess. Is that something you've thought about?
I mean, Doug Peterson's offense utilizes slot receivers immensely. Yeah. So I don't hate that. But the problem is that Jacksonville has like 80 slot receivers right now. So it's like, all right, at a certain point, one of these guys has to play outside. So, and that's going to be the problem, is because Christian Kirk, when he's played outside, he has struggled. Yeah. He's not an outside receiver. He flourished playing the slot in Arizona.
Yeah, Kelly's an Arizona fan. What do you think about Kirk? And maybe give us a little more deep dive as a Homer fan. I mean, I'm a Bengals fan. I'm unabashedly a Bengals fan. I'll tell you all you want to know about Auden Tate. I think that's a terrific signing for the Falcons. But what do you think about Kirk, I guess, as someone who's seen it maybe more than I have?
I've been really kind of saddened by all of the trades that have happened with the Arizona team, because we had a great team and now it's basically been dismantled. And there are some key players. I'm really excited to see Rondale Moore perhaps get more share of the ball. At training camp, he and Murray worked really well together. As far as Kirk goes, I'm sad to see him go. But if this is a better opportunity for him, great. I just don't see him on the same level as some of these other receivers. And so for him to be put into this spotlight, into this highly paid position, that's a lot of pressure. And I hope he can live up to it, but I just don't see it happening. I just don't.
Well, he hasn't proven that he can, unlike Devontae and Tyreek, right? Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Josh, are you kind of on that?
Gamble.
Are you on that same page? Are you buying Kirk? Are you selling Kirk? What are you doing if you have Kirk in Dynasty? Maybe that's a way to put it.
I'm definitely not selling him. I actually swung a trade in one of my leagues last year. I had Chris Godwin, and I traded Godwin. It was right after his ACL tear, and I pulled off Kirk, and I want to say a first in 2023, or it was 2 seconds, one of those two. Mostly because I felt that Kirk was going to get an opportunity somewhere. I didn't think that he was going to go back to Arizona, mostly because I didn't think that there were, I figured the top free agent wide receivers were all going to get paid. Like a new Mike Williams was going to get paid. Adams was going to get paid. I didn't expect Adams to get traded per se, but I kind of felt, even when we did our wide receiver free agent show, that, it was going to come down to either the Raiders or the Packers. It was going to be one of those two teams. With Kirk, I expected him to move on. I didn't expect him to make more money than God himself. So that to me was the most shocking part of Kirk's free agency. But again, landing in a system that utilizes slot receivers, I do think there is upside. It's just going to be a matter of how quickly is he going to gel with Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence didn't exactly look great last year. And, I understand you can chalk that up to shoddy coaching because Urban Meyer's terrible. You could put it to a lot of different things. But now it's, okay, we got a new head coach. We've got a new system. If everybody remembers the 2 years ago in Philadelphia, Doug Peterson his offense wasn't looking great either. So, there's still cause for pause here for me. And the Jaguars' offensive line still isn't great. I know they brought in Brandon Scherf. They tagged Cam Robinson, but Cam Robinson, this is now 2 years in a row that he's been franchise tagged, and he's still a very average left tackle in this league. Brandon Scherf is kind of on the downside of his career, in all honesty. He hasn't been great the last couple of years for Washington, and he's really just kind of getting paid off of the fact that he was a top 10 NFL draft pick and has been a Pro Bowler in the past because he was a top 10 draft pick.
When he hasn't been terrible. So, I guess that's all you got to be, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Again, he hasn't been atrocious, but he hasn't exactly been great. And that's all it takes to get paid if you're an offensive lineman in free agency. So I'm still not convinced. Go ahead. No, I was going to say, despite the addition, so to speak, that the Jags have made, they still don't have a great offensive line. And they just lost Brandon Linder too, who is actually a really good center for them. So, this doesn't really feel like, addition by subtraction. It's kind of a moot situation to me. So I don't think
A
it's
neutral
really gotten
move.
better. Yeah, it's very neutral. And so I'm kind of like, there's a potential for volume, but is it going to look like what Juju put up 2 years ago, where it's like 120 targets, 90 catches, and like 700 yards? Because that's kind of what I feel like could very well happen at this point.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I am rolling the dice, despite what I've said about Kirk. They're not going to put up that much money and not utilize him, which you've mentioned earlier in the program, Andrew. It's just ridiculous to think that they're going to put him in. They're going to utilize him. He's going to get plenty of touches. Are they going to be quality yards? I have no idea. Is he going to score touchdowns? I have no idea. But I do know they're going to utilize him, and that's enough for me to have been buying on Christian Kirk.
I think the biggest thing is it's gonna be, you're gonna see very early that they're gonna do what they can to scheme to get him the football, and then it becomes, if he's not effective with it, they're going to go elsewhere, right? So this could very well be a situation where he could have a good first half of the year, but a really bad second half, and then it absolutely tanks his dynasty value. Yeah. Or he becomes a very cheap buy going into year 2, where now he has a year to get more acquainted in the system, to get better feel for Trevor Lawrence and their, rapport. And then the sky's the limit. And then you basically, acquired him for, say, a 3rd round pick and hit a freaking home run.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions that all of us are going to have to just wait and see with the whole Jacksonville offense really is kind of like, is it James Robinson or ETN? Are they going to split? I mean, isn't Evan Ingram in Jacksonville now too?
Yep.
Right. So it's like, there's so many weapons, and part of me is like, can Trevor Lawrence handle all those weapons? Are they going to all be able to eat? I mean, I don't know.
I think you're going to see a lot of these guys get cut in training camp.
Well, that's very.
I don't think Ingram will. I mean, he signed his deal is basically fully guaranteed, so I think Ingram's safe. Peterson wasn't the one that traded for Dan Arnold. He wasn't the one that drafted Laviska Shenault. He wasn't the one that brought in Jamal Agnew. So, like, he didn't sign Marvin Jones. So he doesn't have any real attachment to these guys. So
Agnew, I'm almost certain is gone. I think Jones is probably
but even
gone.
Then, they could just say,
gone,
you know what, he's just going to be a kick returner and that's it. Like, they moved Agnew more into that offense when ETN went down. Like, he kind of became the guy that, we thought that ETN.
And Chark went down too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then Chark got hurt, so there went the other outside threat. But then they said, all right, well, now we're going to move Laviska outside. Shenault's not an outside receiver; he's a slot guy. He's somebody that you need to manufacture touches for. Well, then you went out and paid $18 million a year for Christian Kirk. So unless you're running 4 wide, Shenault's going to stay on the outside and be nothing. Or he's going to.
How many slots can we find in this offense? Right? Like
exactly.
There's only so many. Yeah.
So the only 2 people truly on that offense right now that I would feel comfortable drafting, Kirk as like a wide receiver 4 and Travis Etienne, because I've seen for many years, Doug Peterson has 0 issue throwing the football to his running backs. And we know that that's something that Etienne does well.
One other little aspect, because I know we should move on to the other segment, but the one thing I was thinking about too is if it's not just Christian Kirk season, but they play by committee, which is totally possible with that many weapons. They're going to just split up the share. Like you said, Andrew, can he possibly feed everybody? Well, he will feed everybody, but in bite-sized pieces. And that's probably the worst outcome that we could have, in my opinion, with all those players.
I kind of agree. And I think Kyle mentioned it in the chat. Marvin Jones might be the best value. I think Visca's the best value. I think there's a bunch of people that are just done. They're like, I'm out. They signed Kirk. That's the guy's job. I mean, you could probably even find Visca on some shallower dynasty waiver wires at this point. Like, he's one of those guys that I could see getting cut during rookie drafts and things when you have to make room in your roster. But I think that's the kind of player.
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I think he could be cut during training camp or traded.
Right.
I mean,
right. And I don't think you're alone on that. I think there's a lot of people that assume that that's true too. But if that happens and let's say he lands somewhere like, let's say he goes to Green Bay, they need some help there. They don't have anybody. And at this point, I don't care if you're a slot or whatever, just go catch the ball from Aaron Rodgers. He'll figure it out, you know? So I think there is still some potential. And again, what Kelly was saying is the optimist, like, hey, you're a young kid. You can do it. Go find a home somewhere else, right? I mean, even Marvin Jones is younger than me. So, I mean, you're a young kid. Go ahead, Marvin. No, okay, maybe not. But yeah, there's plenty of that kind of upside and potential with some of these other receivers. I think the only other person I agree with you, Josh. The only other person I'd be willing to kind of buy or, you know, have on my team or draft in general is Trevor Lawrence, right? While it's a bite-sized portion, I would love to have Trevor as a QB2 in Superflex, for instance. I think there's enough room there for that offense to potentially score some points, and who knows who it's going to be, but odds are it's coming from Trevor. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of frustration in Florida right now. Let's just put it that way. We talked about the Bucs staying steady. Well, the Jags are changing about everything. They're changing the market on receivers. They're changing coaches. They're changing tight ends. Like, they're just getting everybody down. So, and then of course we've got Tua in Miami, who just got Tyreek. I mean, Florida is a crazy place anyway, but now you had all this football chaos.
I live here. Trust me. I'm very well aware.
I was just going to say, Josh, would you agree with this way of generalizing Florida as a Floridian?
Florida's a shit show. It's always a shit show.
Spring break all the time, baby. That's how we roll.
Yep.
All right. So I think that pretty much covers it. There really wasn't a whole lot this week. And I think that was some good general content and kind of how free agency can impact Dynasty. I think there's still a lot of meat on that bone that we're going to get into over the next month or so here as we get into the draft and all that. But appreciate your thoughts on that for sure, guys. Our last segment of the night, which is my favorite segment every week, is the Find Me a Trade segment. So before we get into this, I want to make sure that we're kind of figuring out what's going on. The reason we're doing this league tonight, this is submitted by Jay Felicio. Jay is a friend of the show. He's obviously a friend of the industry. I'm pretty sure you guys know Jay at this point, G-Men Jay on Twitter. So this is a league that he's in with Rocky and Scott. So the logic was we can't do that trade with Rocky and Scott. That's not fair because they're going to tank Jay's team. They're going to give him bad advice. So what I decided was, well, hey, they're not on this show. Let's put Jay's trade on this one. It's what we were talking about. So I'll do real quick. I'll kind of pull up some of this, pull up the team and read through it. And then we'll get into some of the trades. Jay is on vacation in Disney, so he was not able to give us comments. But at the same time, I think we can tell from the team what his needs are, and we'll get into that. But it is a 12-team Superflex PPR with a 2.0 PPR tight end premium. So this is a very heavy tight end premium, tight end favorable league in a sense. Again, it is QB. It's start 11, QB, two running backs, 2 receivers, that tight end, 4 flex, and a super flex. So it's start 11, which again that's a pretty deep starting roster. And I think that's something we're going to have to, keep in mind as we come into play here. It's 29 bench, 30 IR, and 4 taxi. So this is, again, deep league. And I love deep leagues because then you got nothing on the waivers. You got to make a trade. You got to make a move. That makes it a little bit more interesting. As a trade addict myself and a junkie of Dynasty, I love when you have to make a trade. So real quick, let me pull up his team because I want to make sure that we discuss this, at least in general. And then we'll get into some of the trades you guys came up with. Okay, so again, Superflex, which I think is something to be said when you've got Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, and Kyle Trask are your only QBs. Oh boy, Jay, that sounds like you might be some needs there. Running back, you've got Nick Chubb, Cam Akers, Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell, Raheem Mostert, and really that's it. But 5 running backs that are kind of start worthy or flexible. I don't mind that. Receivers, we've got that Tyreek Hill we were talking about before, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, Rondale Moore, that LaVisca we were talking about as well, Kendrick Bourne, who I think is kind of underrated a little bit. And then there's Quintez Cephas. There's some other guys that, John Brown maybe lands in Tampa and does something. Tutu, who knows what Tutu is going to be doing? Probably nothing. A couple other receivers that are not really worth it much. And then tight end, we've got Gerald Everett, Michael Pruitt, and Kyle Rudolph, which again, woof. It's not terrible, but I mean, Gerald Everett doesn't instill a lot of confidence. But I guess let's go into your trade first, Kelly. What was the thought process you had, and where would you take Jay's team if it was yours to trade on?
So I was thinking about one of my own teams that is kind of trash. And I'm sorry, Jay, but your team is not very good.
Drop that mic, Kelly. I like it.
I'm saying this all with love,
That's right.
love. We're talking about Superflex. Yes, I understand it's tight end premium. Yes, I understand you have a lot of starters. I understand that it's a deep roster. But let's get real and talk about where most of the points come from, and that's your quarterback. you have a terrible bench for quarterbacks. At least Jared Goff is starting like right for now, like maybe not after the draft. And then he has Kyler Murray, right? I just lost my brain.
Yes,
So
Kyler Murray, your boy Kyler.
at least he has Kyler Murray. That's pretty much the only bright spot, because Goff, I don't even know that he would put up double digits points per game on a good day. So does that count? I don't know. So here's my trade offer. I think he needs to build up QB. I am terrible at trading. One, because I am not confident in if the person likes my trade or not. And two, because I get attached to my players. But I'm not attached to any of these players. He needs a better team. So let's offer McLaurin to the team that's NT's greater than D plus L, U plus L. I don't know what it is, but this team
it's a great
has
team name. Yeah.
This team has Jalen Hurts. We're not playing a team game here. This is an individual player that brings in consistent points per game. And I'm super comfortable with, at least for one season, playing Jalen Hurts, making the play for Jalen Hurts. If not, if they decline, he should probably go for Mac Jones in that case, just to get some youth. You know that the Patriots are going to keep him as their franchise quarterback and build him up. So there's safety there. So I'm saying to offer McLaurin. And because you're getting a QB, I'm throwing in the 2.2 rookie draft. I think that's fair.
I like it. I think that there is definitely a need at QB. And in these kind of leagues, sometimes you got to overpay to get one. And I think maybe this would be looked at as an overpay on a calculator, but that's not always what these calculators are. Not everything. Calculators are a good idea, but they're not going to get deals done.
Well,
so I think that's a smart start.
One of the other reasons I did the 2.2 is that he has, I don't know if the listeners know this or not, but he has 2 other first round picks. So there's even still room to play if you're going to overpay per se based on what he has. So he's still making out with 2 first round picks, giving away his second round pick to sweeten up the pot. But if the person balks, if he can get Hurts and has to give away his, I think it's 1.8, I don't see that as being a huge sacrifice either. And McLaurin, I think, is a great wide receiver to add to that team's wide receiver roster.
Oh, that's great. And I wanted to clarify, you're right. He's got the 102, the 108, 202, and then some other later picks. So he does have 2 first round, pretty good picks. He could use the 102 on a receiver or on a running back or on a quarterback, or I don't think you're going to use it on a tight end. Yeah, that'd be risky.
No Kyle Pitts in this class, guys.
right. Maybe the Giants take a tight end early, and they get Wiedermeyer and G-Men Jay Felicio is like, I got this. I got it. No, I think that you're on the right track. And again, just for the sake of argument, plugging it into the DLF calculator just to see what it is, it's 501 for Jalen Hurts and 493.8 for the McLaurin 202. So it ends up being very fair on a calculator, as if that, and again, we just said it doesn't matter. But it is nice to see, okay, well, that's worth sending. Here's the logic. There are plenty of people out there that value Hurts as more than that, and there are plenty of people that value him less than that. There is a whole batch of people. Well, there is a whole batch of people that don't think he's going to start more than this season, really. And again, Josh, as an Eagles fan, which side of that trade are you on? Which one would you rather have?
I'm always going to side with the quarterback, especially in Superflex. So, it's one of those, it's a sad state really, because anytime you're in a Superflex league, you're not ever going to get one at a value. You are always going to have to overpay. It's just the nature of the beast, because nobody wants to part with quarterbacks. They don't want to be left hanging. I think the upside here that Jay has is he has the 102, right? And this is a very weak quarterback class. So you could see a situation where a quarterback doesn't go 101. Mm-hmm. And then he has a shot to get, the best quarterback from this class. Now, whether that's Malik Willis, whether it's Pickett, whether it's, Ritter, Corral, whomever it may be, we talked about this actually on our Wednesday show. We brought in Kevin Coleman, co-host of the Debbie Royale. we were literally talking about this year's quarterback class. And one thing that we kind of been ingrained in my head over the years when we've done like our intro to Dynasty show and had other people on is that quarterbacks always have the most value in Superflex. So even in a weaker quarterback class, if one ends up having high draft capital, their value isn't going to sink much from year 1 to year 2. I mean, Trevor Lawrence last year being the 101, not just in the NFL draft, but in rookie Superflex drafts in most instances, started like, I think his startup value was at like QB8, QB9.
Yeah.
Well, it's currently at like QB 12, 13. Like it hasn't
15.
sunk.
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So there's still that insulated value that's built in as that highest draft capital quarterback. So if Malik Willis ends up going at 102 to the Lions or even 106 to the Panthers, to me that's an easy 101 in a Superflex draft. But if somebody else says, you know what, I would much rather take a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker. Now he's got the best valuable chip in this draft class sitting at the 102. So I went a different direction in my trade simply for that reason. I said, let's try to fix the tight end position. Let's try to fix it cheap. So I said, you know what? Let's take one of your somewhat decent receivers and get a somewhat decent tight end. And I said, let's trade Kendrick Bourne to this isn't Madden, and get Logan Thomas. This manager has some decent depth at the tight end position, and he's absolutely loaded at wide receiver. So maybe it's probably not a trade that he would consider taking because, again, I believe he's got like Cooper Kupp. He has Deebo Samuel. He's got Jalen Waddle. He has Mike Williams, Stephon Diggs. Like he's absolutely loaded, right? But in these settings, he can start up to 6 wide receivers.
Yep.
And he's got Mixon, Jonathan Taylor, and Austin Eckler. Well, if any one of those running backs goes down, you're basically deciding between Kareem Hunt and a wide receiver at that point. Maybe a tight end, sure. Ricky Seals-Jones going to the Giants, I think there's going to be some opportunity there. So he still has a decent backup to Zach Ertz. But I think you can get Logan Thomas for cheap coming off of the injury. And we all know how much Carson Wentz likes to target the tight end and how much the tight end is targeted in that Washington offense. So I think that's a solid trade for both parties. It provides some decent depth in the event that like catastrophe strikes his wide receiver core this year. And it fixes a tight end issue, at least temporarily for now, and sees what and again, it keeps draft picks out of these trades, which I feel like Jay needs those picks for this year at the very minimum to try to trade back in some instances to build up in the 2023 draft class.
I don't mind that. Kelly, what are your thoughts on Josh's trade there?
Yeah, I think that's probably a solid trade. I know that he does need help in that tight end position. And personally, I play multiple tight ends in most of my leagues just because I like the versatility that they add to my teams. But at the end of the day, when I look at this team, I don't know that tight end would be my first Band-Aid. I know you feel.
Well, I think too it tells you a lot, and that's why I like these segments, because not only do we get to explain how we play, and that's why I like when guests get to come on and explain it, because there's so many ways to build a trade, and I think ultimately it comes down to where do you go? If this is your team, what move do you make? And the main reason I like that is because especially as a new Dynasty player, I have no idea what to trade for. I don't like, what am I looking at here? So this opens up some doors for Jay, and hopefully he listens to this after he's back from Disney and having a great time, and he can listen to this podcast and go, I never thought of that. Logan Thomas would be a good option, right? It kind of gives you some outside the box perspective, as we said earlier. So I think there is something to be said too with doing a small trade isn't the end of the world, because if you can pull off something like this and upgrade your tight end position for the cost of a Kendrick Bourne, that's not too bad. Yeah. Low risk, maybe high reward. I don't mind that.
I also hadn't thought about what Josh said. I hadn't thought about what you said about Wentz favoring the tight end position. So that's something that also didn't necessarily cross my mind. And that's a great point, which makes this another great option.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they get caught up in every time they make a trade, it's got to be a blockbuster, right? It's like, I've got to go get that like top 5 guy. Like, what can I do to get that top 5 guy? And it's not always about that. Sometimes it's as easy as, you know what, I'm going to trade this 3rd round pick to get a decent depth piece. Or I'm going to take the 7th wide receiver on my roster to maybe, you know, temporarily put a Band-Aid over a position that I'm hurting at. You know,
well,
and again, I mean, you never know. I mean, maybe he says no. He probably says no, and that's fine. Shoot him a DM. Hey, you know, what are your thoughts? Like, you know, you just not interested in Bourne. You don't want to give up Thomas, and then start the dialogue. That's kind of the way that I operate trades. Like, I try to offer something that's fair in my mind, value wise, but I don't know what they're thinking about their team unless we start that dialogue.
And that's kind of where I was going to get into this too, is that both of these trades, in my opinion, have room to add on Jay's side. But there's no reason to throw that over the wall with 108. Throw it with 202, right? With Kelly's trade, right? Like, same with yours. Like, throw it with Kendrick Bourne. Maybe they say yes to that, right? And I think sometimes there is this, you know, it's a fine line and every league is different. And again, all we do every week, we talk about trades on this show and we talk about what we would do and how we would do it. And we're going in with very little, and we don't even know which teams are Rockies and Scots. Right? We can't see that, which I think is hilarious. They didn't tell us. I don't want to know. It doesn't matter, right? But the point is, if you send an offer like that, sometimes, depending on the league, you know that other manager in that league, and you send that offer, and they put you on blast in the group DM, like, what a crappy offer. And all. Why would I send you a smash accept offer? Like, what's the logic in this? Why would I send you something that is so good you had to say yes to it? It's a negotiation. And if anything, what we're talking about here are starting points. They're not the end points, right? Like, maybe that's kind of the theme of tonight's show is entry points. You know, this is an entry point into trading. Like, you're sending a low ball in a sense. You're not being rude about it. I'm not sending Kendrick Bourne for Joe Mixon. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to get like your best. And I'm not trying to send it for a quarterback and get 17 players off my team. No. These are okay trades. It's just, I might have a little room to negotiate. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle on Twitter when you have people that are like, I need to win the trade. And it's in a vacuum. You don't see the 13 trades that went back and forth until it got there. Right. Sometimes that context can come in handy too, right? Especially too with back to Kelly's. If I'm sending McLaurin in the 202 and I'm getting a quarterback, that's a steal. I would love to have that. And I think you're right, Josh. Does the guy say yes to that? Maybe not. But what does he add? Maybe he adds somebody else. Maybe he switches from Terry McLaurin to someone else. Maybe he, instead of the 202, he wants a 2nd and 23, and that's all. Who knows, right? The other guy might have a whole bunch of needs that we don't even think about. So it just gives you a way to start the ball rolling, right? And I guess to pivot into my trade too, just to kind of wrap up here, mine was a similar idea, kind of, I guess, in a way to both of you, because I was trading Terry McLaurin to, I love this team name, Ready, Down, Hut, for Pat Freiermuth and Miles Sanders. So, and again, what I'm looking at here is McLaurin, who I think is, all of these trades include Washington players, which I think is hilarious. The Commodores, whatever they're called. The Terry McLaurin, great guy, great player, but I'm nervous, right? I'm a little scared of tears at this point. And I think getting Freiermuth is a stud tight end in my book. I love Freiermuth. I think he's got a high, good future, high potential, high upside, all that. And then Miles Sanders, I think a lot of people are low on Miles Sanders. They're kind of ready to get off that train. Gainwell took a lot of time last year to come in, but when he did, he played well. So I feel like that's a trade you might be able to work on it. And then you add a young tight end to your team that gives you some options. And yeah, you're getting rid of Scary Terry, but I think that's the kind of trade. It's sort of like both of your trades in a way together, where I'm sending Terry, but I'm getting a tight end instead of a quarterback. But I mean, again, Kelly, I guess, what do you think about that trade? It involved the same guy. Am I on the right track?
I think you're on the right track. Being that I'm new to Dynasty and I'm fearful of trading, I would feel like they're like giving up Luth, who has a great high ceiling, and Miles Sanders, whose people are low on, and getting Terry McLaurin in exchange, and they may feel like you do, that it's Scary Terry, so they're going to want something else. But there is still room to negotiate, which is exactly what you said. Don't throw out your best offer, which is like in my offer why I didn't do the 108. Start with a 202, and yours, you're not starting with any picks. You're just starting with McLaurin, who's a high value receiver. So I think you are on the right track for sure for negotiation. I can see both sides of that for sure.
Josh, what do you think about
in
that?
all
Are you on the
honesty,
same
if
page?
I'm Jay right now, I'm looking to trade like half his team. Like
Yep.
I would be looking to bail out on Tyreek Hill. I would get whatever I can for DeAndre Hopkins. I would take the bag of chips and a doggy bag for LaVisca Chenault at this point. And just ride in with as many young guys as you can, and see what you can get for Nick Chubb too. You're probably not going to be able to trade Goff. I mean, I feel like the best bet you could probably get is a high second at this point. You could probably break the bank with Kyler, but that's just going to reset you at quarterback. But I mean, at this point, you need to accumulate as much draft capital as you can, because your two highest scoring potential positions at quarterback and tight end are pretty barren. And being a deep league, you need as many dart throws as possible. So I would be looking to bail on some of these older players that he has right now and hit reset.
Well, and again, I think what you're doing is what I would do is, if I'm in this kind of position, I'll be honest, this is probably a middle of the road team. I don't see this as the worst team in the league, but it's probably not making the playoffs with as it sits right now. Even with those 2 first-round picks, I don't think that's enough to turn it around. And the worst place to be in Dynasty is the middle. There's no more of a purgatory than being 7th or 8th in your league. So I think if I'm kind of hitting on what you said, Josh, if I'm Jay, if I'm a manager and I have this team, I'm blowing up as many of the big pieces for smaller upside plays as I can. And that's kind of where, again, the sending one McLaurin for 2 guys that I think I can get more from. In all honesty, what I would probably do if that trade were to go through, I'd probably look to send Sanders for 2 pieces below him and kind of keep breaking it down and just keep getting picks in the future, keep, anti-consolidate, right? Like, let's just explode this up. And I think I know a friend of ours, Kelly, at least I'm sure Josh is a fan too, but Jeff Bell put this out on Twitter where he's like, consolidation is my love language. And I'm like, why that is? I agree. Because when I'm consolidating, it's because I'm contending. When I'm consolidating, it's because I'm going for the title. I'm trying to take my depth and make my lineup as good as it can be. That's when you consolidate. When your team isn't great, there's no need to consolidate. I don't want to win. I would rather be last than 7th. So at this point, I'm blowing up every piece that's scoring points. I don't want points on my team, especially in March. But I mean, I'm just trying to add value to my team and not points, not production. Mm-hmm. Let's get trade value. Let's send Tyreek for 106 and a 23 first. Maybe that's not enough, but at the same time, I'll take it. You know what I mean? Let's just move. And I think that some of this too is you have about a month until the NFL draft, give or take a month until most rookie drafts. This is the time of year when you can try to start making some of those moves and say, all right, well, who do I want to load up on? Because picks accrue value until they become on the clock, and then they decrease heavily once they're picked. So I don't think you're going to be able to get picks once they're on the clock for, definitely for more than you are today. So you might as well try. And in this league, just again, because I think context is fun on this, there is a team on this. And again, we don't know who manages this team, but there's a team with 6 first-round picks this year. The Nigerian Nightmares has 6 first-round picks in 2022, and it looks like 4 second-round picks. So that is a team that has been doing this already. They've already been blowing it up and getting a lot of picks in the 22 draft. I would look at that and say, all right, well, if I'm them, if I am that team with a bunch of picks, I'm probably looking to trade some of those and consolidate a little, because where are you going to put all that on your roster? Right. And
yeah, so I mean, he definitely has some good pieces to build around. I mean, he's got DJ Moore, he has T. Higgins, he has Justin Jefferson. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, George Kittle. Like, really, his biggest weakness, he's really young at quarterback. He's got Zach Wilson, Davis Mills, Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
But again, you could probably take 2 of those firsts and get a decent quarterback.
Well, a backup trade that I had in case somebody was way too close, or in case we didn't have enough on this. One of the other thoughts I had was a general theory of sending Kyler to that team for a bunch of those picks and be like, hey, you know what?
Yeah, you could definitely do that too.
He's got, again, this is Nigerian Nightmares we're talking about. He's got J.K. Dobbins, and that's about it at running back. Okay, you can figure out a running back too. That's not the end of the world. And then looking at, Brandon Bolden scored a ton of points. Maybe he comes back on the Raiders. Maybe Jerick McKinnon does something. You never know. But again, you've got plenty of picks. You can still pick a running back. But then his receivers, he's got Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, DJ Moore. What was the other one he had? Well, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you mentioned. So, he's got a solid receiving core, which is where I like to build my teams. So that's someone where, if you add Kyler Murray to that team, that becomes a contender. Like now that team is just one running back
and they
away.
still have picks to continue to improve.
Well, that's what I mean.
Continue to build going forward. Yeah,
if you're only one running back away, you're a contender anyway. Because running back's one of those positions, we see it every year. In week 8, you get a name off the waivers in Dynasty that becomes a top 20 running back. It just happens every year because of the nature of the beast. I mean, Philip Lindsay gets traded at the deadline to a team that's desperate who's making a contending run. Philip Lindsay gets traded to Buffalo and becomes a stud. Who knows, right? So I love taking all the flyers he's got at running back. But again, that team is like one player away from dominating. And I don't think that Malik Willis or Desmond Ridder or Carson Strong makes enough of a difference on this team. He needs, in my opinion, that's where Nigerian Nightmares could do some damage. So if you trade Kyler there, and again, that's probably where, if you're really looking to blow it up, that's the first piece I move. Not Tyreek, not the receivers. I move Kyler, and I'm just like, I'm off this train. I want no points on my team. You don't have tight ends. I don't want quarterbacks then. Like you said, Josh, those are the biggest points. I'm out.
Yeah, I had a similar situation in a Superflex with like 30-man rosters. Like I'm sitting with Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Trevor Lawrence. Like I'm absolutely set at quarterback, but I've got nothing else. Like Hunter Henry is my best tight end. Brandon Ayuk, my best wide receiver. Like I really just did not have the pieces. And I ended up swinging a deal. I traded Mahomes, got 3 first-round picks. So now I'm sitting with 4 firsts in 2022. I'm sitting with 2 firsts in 2023. And I've got pieces now across both of the next 2 drafts to be able to either use to reload or just grab the draft picks and pray to God they hit.
As a new Dynasty player, Kelly, is this helpful? Are you enjoying this talk? I see you're just kind of soaking it in, but I guess what is your thought on trading Kyler, your boy?
Yeah, I am just soaking it in. I have Kyler on the team that I'm trying to rebuild, but what I ended up doing was keeping him and a handful, like 2 or 3 other key players, and I have a ton of first round picks in 2022 and 2023. And I've made some good moves. I actually should show like a before and after at some point, but it was very similar. It's like I have a lot of mediocrity going on that I could move for, a better chance, consolidate it, like you said, basically blow it up, except I ended up holding on to Kyler Murray because I felt like that's one of the only pieces I had at that point.
Well, yeah, and there is something to be said that even if you have that top level quarterback, to hang on to them because they are insanely difficult to acquire.
Oh, sure.
Right.
I'm not saying that's the only move. I'm just saying I like to, if I'm going to blow it up, I want 0 points. I want the fewest amount of points I can get on my team. And I think Kyler he's the solid quarterback, and it's definitely something worth building around. But again, the way this roster is set up with the 2 tight end premium, it's like, man, maybe I just booted another year. And again, we don't know all the context. We say this all the time. We're doing the best we can with the info we have. But sometimes that outside perspective can open some doors and say, maybe Jay's like, I've been trying to trade Kyler. Nobody's giving me fair value. Well, that's great. I didn't know that. That's why I'm mentioning it. Or maybe he's like, I never thought of that, but that guy is, I mean. So again, that's the thought process and why we do this, because I think, again, it helps us solidify our thoughts, helps us find trades. I can't tell you how many times I do this exercise every week that I'm on this show and I find a trade or 2 or 3 or whatever. And then I go to my leagues and I'm like, you know what? I am going to trade for LaVisca. I'm going to send some offers, right? Like, let's go see what I can get. And I think too, with every league being different, there are some leagues that are very stale and very quiet this time of year. And then one trade opens it up, right? Yep. One trade leads to another trade. And again, I think what you said is perfectly put, Kelly. Sometimes it's, as a new Dynasty player, you can be nervous and gun shy. Like, I don't want to mess it up. The only way to fix a bad trade is to make another trade. So I think that's what got me addicted, was that my first year I screwed up the draft in my first Dynasty league. It was an auction draft. I did not do well. I'll be honest. I price enforced incorrectly. Well, yeah, and I had only done a couple before that, and it was my first ever Dynasty, and I price enforced incorrectly and got stuck with like AJ Green, who was not a good pick, right? And I was like, you know what? I didn't tank per se. I just did badly that first year. But at about week 9, I was like, I'm over. Let's go for it. And I started trading everybody. I traded for injured players. Like, I just literally did productive struggle as I started reading more and learning more and getting to know the industry more. I was like, that's something I can do. And it helped a lot. My team is set now. I'm good, right? But sometimes too, and I think this gets lost in some of the shuffle, just because you trade away Kyler doesn't mean you can't trade for him later, right? Just because you have a lot of
That's
picks
true.
doesn't mean you have to make these picks. Just, trading once it's not the last trade you're ever going to make. Lord willing, we have more time to trade, right? So I always look at it like, let's just increase value. Let's do what we can to help my team and play it like a general manager instead of with my heart. But I do have a Bengal on every single one of my teams. I have to. That's my rule.
I'm the same way with the Eagles, dude. I'm the
I
same
have
way.
to. I want to have somebody.
My problem is it's Jalen Rager on most of my teams, and I just want to try. So
I'm sorry, Josh. That's a different podcast. We're not here to talk about you. No, I'm just kidding. That sounds like it'd be fantasy intervention. Actually, maybe they should do one of those. But with that said, I think we've helped Jay a lot. And again, hopefully he can come up with a trade here. I'm sure Rocky and Scott will mention if either of these or any of these teams are theirs. And I'm sure they'll give some feedback. And if they've heard our feedback and it is their team, they're going to be like, I'm asking for more. But that's fine. That's what this is for. But again, I think that was great. So thank you, Jay, for submitting your team. Thank you for being at Disney and enjoying your family. I think that sometimes gets lost too. All of us content creators need to reset, do what you got to do. I don't think there's ever been a time where I've told someone you need to create more content. It's the exact opposite. Create less content. Live your life. Go do what makes you happy. I'm always a fan.
At the end of the
So
day,
again,
that's what leads to really good content.
Bingo. Yeah, being
When you're
fresh
out
and coming at it
experiencing
differently.
life, yeah.
Yep. And again, we've seen some real world stuff in the past couple of weeks. I know Kelly has had some really interesting stuff that she's been honest about. But again, like the real world is there, and this can be a distraction. So sometimes it's good to just let it out, vent it out, get it out there, and refresh.
I was just going to say, like, I've been scrolling while you've been talking. You're right. Yes, I listened to everything you said about decompressing and refreshing, but I wanted to just add one little bit about how my team, and I kind of blew it up a little bit. One of the players I wasn't thinking about moving was Judy, because he was one of my only players that might have been worth holding on to. But I was able to trade Judy plus one of my plethora of 2 picks, the 2.8. And that's where I got Kirk, and I couldn't remember who else I got, but it was Schultz. And I think that was a solid move for my team, getting those 2 players for Judy. And like I said, I have a plethora of 2 picks, and I was able to trade. I did trade my 1.1, which I had been holding on to. I still have the 03 and 05.
What'd you trade the 101
What'd
for?
you get? Yeah.
I ended up getting Justin Fields and Ezekiel Elliott. And I also
For the 101 alone?
And the 10, one of my other 10s, 8s.
So 101 and 108 for Fields and Zeke. I like that.
Yeah, I don't think
I do that
at all. I like that.
So I still have that, and then I still have the 105. Now I'm lost, but I have 2 other ones.
Good. That's all that matters. You've got some options, and you can still trade those when you're on the clock or something.
Yeah.
You know, you can still.
Yeah, I've sent trade offers. I've got the 101 in a couple Superflex leagues, and I've sent it out for, like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, just to kind of see like how people are feeling about them after a disappointing rookie season. And I've gotten some unfavorable responses back, but it's it's like well, I don't know how you feel about them. They fucking sucked last year,
Right. Well, no, and I think it's a good point.
The whole point I was trying to share there was that while I was holding on to Kyler Murray, I really needed to build a better team, build a bigger team. And as I read about the 22 class, there wasn't anything that really stood out at me that I needed immediately for this year that I can't get in 2023, where again, I have another 3 or 4 first round picks and another 3 or 4 second round picks, just because I did not know what I was doing in my first draft. So
I think you did fine. That sounds like you're doing all right. So actually, this is a good pivot in a sense, and we can wrap up after this. But there was a discussion going on. Like, I know this has kind of always been a discussion, but which do you prefer, Kelly, drafting or trading? Like, do you prefer the startup or the in-season work? Which do you prefer?
I prefer the startup, but I think it's just because when I choose a player, it's because I love them. I really like them. I become attached to them. And then when it comes to trades, I don't feel confident in them. So I'm getting more confident. And even going through this exercise, I was like, shoot, you know what? I really do know what I'm talking about, and I need to trust myself more. So this was super helpful.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's what this is for, is to help people. So I'm glad you could get some insights there. And then Josh, I guess, what do you, just because I want to make sure I understand your point too, is it drafting or is it trading? Which, I guess, of the two, which do you prefer?
Honestly, I think I prefer trading more, because you find yourself when you're drafting, sometimes you're not thinking about values.
Right.
You're thinking about my guys, right? It's like, I want to get my guy. If I have to overpay for it, I'll overpay for it. Like for me, I would almost rather do that via trade. Mm-hmm. And during the draft, like I've done drafts where I'm constantly trading up to get guys. I've done the whole, productive struggle, trading back, building as many picks within that 3 to 9 round range and accumulating some rookie picks in 2020, in the next couple drafts and that kind of thing. I've done all the different things, but I think sometimes too, we find ourselves when we're doing, startup drafts that typically are slow drafts, the time tends to screw with you more than you realize, because you're not sitting at a computer and you're not necessarily looking at your rankings. You're just going off of that gut instinct, oh, I'm on the clock. Well, crap, let me make this pick before I'm stuck at work for the next 9 hours, and you're not really all right, I want to take some time. Let me survey the landscape here. Maybe somebody wants to trade up. Maybe I can get something of value here. It's, let me make this pick really quick, So I think the trading aspect tends to be more fun for me than the draft itself.
I agree. Yeah. And I like trading in general. I feel like that's just, I don't want to say exploit people, but it makes it easier. Whereas you said it perfectly, Kelly, when everybody at the draft, they're all their guys. That's all the guys that they wanted. So as soon as the draft ends, there's inevitably this huge lull of weeks or months where no one trades. It's no, I got the guy I wanted. I don't need anything. I'm set. Right. Yeah. And to me, that is the saddest part of every league. Just what? Come on, man. Let's make a trade. Let's do something. And everybody's why would I trade? I just picked him. I know, but I just want to do something. So that's why this year I think is one of the first where I've taken over orphans more than I've done startups, where I'm because that's the best. When you go into a league as an orphan and you take over a team that you have no connection to, and there are some leagues you jump into that and you get an asset list. If I were to take over Jay's team, here's my new asset list. I didn't draft these. I'm not attached. And everybody sees that and they go, "Ooh, fresh meat in the water," and they start sending offers. And they're hey, do you want to get rid of this guy? Do you want to get rid of it? There are sometimes I literally just accept a trade because I'm I was going to send a trade, but that's close enough. Sure. And I'm I'm losing value, but I don't care. I'm making a trade. I'm just getting it going. And so some of that stuff, it's just that's the endorphin hit that I like. I'm a trader.
Yeah. Sure. I've gotten into liking the idea of taking over orphans. I've done it with a couple teams. One that I took over literally in the middle of last year. I turned Dalvin Cook and Chris Godwin into Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, and a bunch of picks. And now I'm sitting with the 101, the 102, the 110, and I'm absolutely loaded with young talent across the board. It just
feels good, doesn't it? It just feels good.
And with Russell Wilson getting traded to Denver, now I feel like I have a legit number one quarterback. Now I just got to solve the issue of Jared Goff behind him. But,
you still got 5 months.
Exactly. I got 5 months to figure that out. And I'll obviously get the best quarterback from this draft too, that I can plug into there. So
very nice. All right. Well, I think that's enough. I think we've covered a lot of different things. I like that we were able to go from kind of an experienced side to a new side. Again, there is no wrong way to play this. I always tell people too, I really want more people to play Dynasty. I think it is the better format. And again, that's just an opinion. I'm not going to trash what you like. I just like it more myself. That's all it is. If you like redraft, go for it. I have no problem with it. If you like IDP, go for it. I'm not here to yuck your yum. You know what I mean? Go have fun with however you want to have fun. But I find that I have the most fun in Dynasty. Redraft, I don't get to make trades in March in redraft. I don't get to talk about the rookies as much in redraft until they're on a team already in August and we already know everything. I like the speculative nature of this whole thing. So that's where I go. So before we go, last thing, of course, I want to make sure we give you guys a chance to kind of push where you are. I know we mentioned a little bit before, but I guess, Kelly, we'll have you go first this time. where can people find you on the Twitter machine, and what are you up to? What are you not up to? Maybe is the shorter list, but where can people find you out there?
Yeah, you know what? I gave a very long introduction at the beginning, and I do want to thank you so much for allowing us the platform to talk about women in fantasy football as well. If anybody's interested in what I'm up to, it's around sports content development, marketing, and I share a lot of just my own personal struggles with mental health. I've just recently shared a story on IBT Media in between media.com, and it's my survival story of sexual assault, so it's kind of heavy and ties in a bit to the Deshaun Watson case. But if you're looking for anything I'm doing, just look at Twitter at Kelly in Phoenix and you can see everything I'm up to.
Perfect, thanks for that. And Joshua, where can people find you, and what are you up to these days?
You can find me on Twitter at the One Hudsonian. Myself, Ryan Weiss, Joe Zolo, my co-hosts. We do No Punt Intended every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Club Fantasy FFL. A lot of what I'm doing in fantasy right now is less writing and more, just trying to build the website, bring in some new contributors, and then, continue to grow and push forward women in fantasy football with Faith and Kelly. Outside of fantasy, I am a screenwriter as well, and I've got a web series that I'm finishing writing, praying to God I can finish it in the next 3 weeks, because I have a director friend of mine in Sarasota that wants to start pre-production on it. He can't do that without the finished script. So obviously I'll have updates on that on my personal Twitter, but more than welcome to follow me for fantasy, as well as, my love for film and comics and music and stuff. So,
well, I think that hits perfectly. None of us just do one thing, right? I was saying before, do you, be you, like just be honest and genuine. And I don't think any of us has just one thing that we're a fan of, right? We all have many things that we like to do. So it's always kind of nice to see other people's other hobbies.
Andrew, I would be remiss if I did not say this. I'm so sorry. Josh just reminded me when he said he's a fan of comics. Today is Trans Visibility Day. And my sister Jody is transgender, and she is a comic book artist. And I shared her work today on my Twitter feed. So if anybody is interested in supporting the trans community, trans artists, and bringing visibility to the transgender space, I would love it if you would go and either purchase from Jody, contribute to her Patreon, or just share and like or comment. It would be so meaningful to me on this particular special day. So thanks.
Oh, good catch. And then I also want to say, make sure that we talk about the Women of Fantasy Football at women_of_FF. Go follow that. Get some new updates. There will be a raffle. I know there was a great time with that last year. You guys will go to the expo, I'm sure, and there's going to be a ton of fun around that when that comes around in August. So make sure you go follow that. Go follow at Galvanize Life as well for that whole movement. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs a little bit more publicity, right? And just can use a little bit more or more eyes on it, so to speak. So I want to make sure I mention those. Obviously, I'm at Andrew Hall FF. Go ahead, Josh.
And real quick, Andrew, because you mentioned the raffles, and you are a Bengals fan. So I will spoil one of the raffles that we're going to give away on Women of Fantasy this year. I have a signed Jamar Chase Bengals jersey that we're going to raffle off.
I was already in, but I'm in. I like it. I'm in.
So that's my one tease.
All right, well, hold it aside for me, and we'll talk about money after. But I do want to. I thank you guys so much for being here.
Bring that check, baby.
Really was a great time. I'm glad we could get through some of this stuff, and obviously, it's good to talk about things outside of Dynasty too, while we're in the off season and everything. So great content you guys put out there, Club FFL, and really appreciate you coming on. Again, I'm at Andrew Hall FF. The other hosts of the show that are not here tonight, that will be back in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict, and Scott Sidlow at Scott_Sidlow, Portfolio Dynasty on Twitter. But definitely, I think there is some. Follow us at Dynasty Junkies. There is some discussion that we always like to have with our listeners, with our viewers. Follow us you can follow the DAP Network at DAP_network, the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP, if you will, which I always do. Follow us so you can see us go live on Thursday nights, and obviously catch Timeline on Wednesdays and Trade Addicts when they go live. Obviously, we got Get Real with Casey Kasem on that network too. So anything we can do to help, promote other voices and talk about new angles on things, we're always a fan of that. Definitely subscribe, rate, and review on the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We mentioned this last week. Leave us some reviews. We are taking new Find Me a Trade submissions. We're always taking new submissions. You can find that either through the pinned tweet on my Twitter or through the Dynasty Junkies link tree, which is on there as well. Definitely, give us some feedback. We'd like to hear about it. And again, as we go into this rookie season, as we go into the full season, we're always listening to fans and listening to listeners. And if you have anything you want to bring up, definitely let us know. But with all that aside, again, thank you guys both so much for being here. But at the end of the day, the best part of this whole thing, good job, everybody. Junkies out. It's taking a minute.
That's StreamYard for you.